So, what are some things in life that seem too good to be true? Eating whatever you want without gaining any weight? Yeah, I'd love that. Earning all the money you want without having to work for it? I think that's the dream for a lot of us. How about having both beauty and brains? Is that even possible? Well, I don't know about people, but when it comes to cars, I think we may just have that happening right here. So the story of this car really begins, almost 70, 80, even I would say 100 years ago. Pre-World War II, cars used to look very different and they were built in a very different way. You had a company that built the chassis of the car, the engine, the mechanicals, and then you had a company that built the body, the coachwork, this design, the styling. And when these coachwork companies had so much freedom, they used to come up with all sorts of beautiful designs. Then what happened after that is that car companies discovered that this was not the most efficient way to make things. So they started combining the mechanicals of the car with the design of the car. It became a one piece, it became one process. And the art of coach building, the art of making beautiful car bodies was lost. And as a result, most cars that most people drove every single day ended up becoming these boring looking sedans, saloons, whatever you want to call them. Then in the early 2000s, it wasn't BMW, it wasn't Ferrari, but it was actually Mercedes. Mercedes realized something. They realized that there were a lot of people who loved how their cars felt, how comfortable they were, how luxurious they were. But just because of the styling, they would not be caught dead in a Mercedes because it looked like an uncle's car, an old man's car, whatever you can think of. And then they took one of their most boring looking cars, the Mercedes E-Class, and they decided to make it look beautiful. From this process was invented the Mercedes CLS. And though it was based on the boring looking E-Class, it looked nothing like it. And Mercedes even came up with a very unusual concept for it. A concept that actually makes no sense because they called it the four-door coupe. Now, coupe means two-door. So to call something a four-door, two-door, yes, there's not much logic in that. But what could not be denied was that the CLS was a beautiful looking car, and compared to the E-Class, it opened up a whole new segment for Mercedes. Now, success is often copied. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So once Mercedes had gotten onto this bandwagon, the other companies started looking at it also. And that's when you had other companies such as Audi come up with the A7, and that's when BMW came up with this car, the Gran Coupe. And this Gran Coupe essentially took the took the coupe, the 6 Series coupe that BMW had, but it extended it. And when you look at this car's design, you realize something. Most cars are built to a constraint because you would like to have the line look longer, you would like to make the car look sleeker, but you are limited by the size of the car. What BMW did here is there are no limitations. The car is as long as it needs to be, it is as wide as it needs to be. And in that freedom, the designers were able to give it classical proportions. It somehow managed to look both sleek and muscular at the same time. It was quite the achievement. Now, the question that we're trying to answer in this video is, can you have beauty and brains? Can this beautiful looking BMW Gran Coupe, 6 Series Gran Coupe, can it actually function like a real car? This is supposed to do that. This is technically a 5-seater. Yes, it's a 5-seater. Technically 4 plus 1, but it does seat 5 people. I can vouch for it, having carried 5 people in it. But does it really work as a car, or are you making too many compromises in pursuit of that beauty, in pursuit of that design? The answer is mixed, actually. On one hand, functionally, this can do everything. This has a large boot. It's very comfortable. This is not like a supercar where you're so low that you can't really figure out what's going on. It's a low car, but it's still very, very usable. But you do realize certain things. When you look at the dashboard, you realize it's curving inwards towards you. It looks beautiful. But the consequence of that is that the vents are located in strange places. The speaker is actually rather small. Say you want to attach your phone next to you. My wife drives this car. You cannot see the phone properly. Even when you try to get into the car, because it is very low, you realize you're seated so low that your legs need to stretch out. So even though this is a very, very long car, the same amount of space feels less because you don't have the vertical space to stretch out your legs in. So there are always small, subtle things that you are noticing. But nonetheless, this still services as a sedan. It does everything you expect it to do. It drives pretty well. It's a little bit of a large car. One thing to know about this car is that going back to that classical proportions, going back to beauty, this car has an extremely long bonnet. So when you're parking, when you're trying to figure out, if whether you can fit into a certain part of a certain narrow road or something, you do need to be careful. But unlike a supercar, unlike those other super beautiful cars, it's not a showstopper. You will not hesitate to take this car anywhere because it will just about work. You may have to work a little bit for it, but hey, they tell you that nothing in life comes without a little bit of work. So if you really want to enjoy that beauty, you can still get away with this car without really restricting yourself. What are some of the other things that I really like about this car? I think it's the sense of occasion. When you look at this car's interior, and I've noticed this from non-car people, people who have no clue about cars, they don't really care, they just get into something to go from A to B. I've had people walk into this car and ask me, what is this? Because they noticed the swooping dashboard, they noticed those seats with the integrated seat belts, they noticed how the back seat also looks like a front seat because it's got almost a cockpit-like feel. They noticed the leather-covered dashboard. Everything about it is just screaming occasion. It's very Italian, honestly, not very German. Because German car interiors tend to be boring, straight lines, functionality. You can almost imagine the very serious German engineer who made those lines and who was like, yeah, don't have fun. This is a serious car. Be serious. But somehow this particular BMW is not that serious. It's very un-BMW. It's very Maserati, honestly, in that way. This is the car that you wish Maserati could build because Maserati is actually the predecessor of the original beautiful four-door. The Maserati Quattroporte is the original four-door, the original beautiful four-door. And honestly, BMW have done Maserati. They've shown Maserati what to do, honestly, with this car. Compare this to the contemporary Maserati Quattroporte, you could argue this car is pretty much as beautiful, but way more functional. In a Maserati, in an older Maserati, you have a sea of buttons, half of which don't work, half of which don't do what you expect them to do. And in the newer Maseratis, you have touch screens that will have you scratching your head because they're slow, they don't really work. It looked like it was designed by somebody while they were having a coffee break. But this car was not designed by somebody having a coffee break. This car was designed in between the coffee breaks when the real work gets done. Everything is where you expect it. It's got all of that BMW logic. It just is a perfect functional German machine. What if you want to buy this instead of buying a regular sedan? Should you do it? Should you do it if you're single? Should you do it if you have children? What are the things for you to know? So think of when you are thinking of buying a belt. You have two choices. You can go and buy a very cheap functional belt. It'll do everything. Or you can buy a designer belt, right? An expensive designer belt, maybe from Hermes, maybe from Gucci, whoever it might be. Now, you have to make certain adjustments when you wear a designer belt. You're not going to throw it around. You're not going to, treat it with the kind of abandon you would do with a cheap functional belt. So but it does the job. The Hermes belt is holding up your pants like you need it to be. Much like the Hermes belt, this car versus a regular sedan, it will do the job. It will do exactly what you expect, but you do need to treat it with a little bit more care. Know that it has a long bonnet. You have all that extra length versus a regular car. Know that you are seated a little bit lower, so visibility is slightly worse, but none of these things are showstoppers. These are just the price to pay. This is just the price to pay to have both beauty and functionality in one package. And at the end of it, that's what this car really is about. It's about having your cake and eating it too. It's about having that beautiful car, having that wonderful luxurious experience, yet you have the practicality. And it is no coincidence that this segment of car, this four-door coupe, this four-door, two-door, has become such a popular segment. So the 6 Series was then replaced with the 8 Series, which is essentially the same concept, but They made it a little bit more upmarket because they realized, hey, people are really loving this idea. Let us earn a little bit more money from it. And the same thing goes with Mercedes. Mercedes had a first generation CLS, second generation CLS, third generation CLS. This idea is just going, places. It's gone down market as well because Mercedes realized, hey, people love the CLS, but they can't afford it. So they made a CLA. They made a four-door coupe version of their A-class hatchback. It's a very confusing combination, but the sales numbers work. And in a way, I think this idea of having everything without compromise kind of sums up how a lot of us think of ourselves these days, right? Back in the day when when things were a little bit worse, when you had to live with a little bit more compromise, maybe consumerism had not advanced so much, we had a mindset, older generations had a mindset that, hey, it's okay. I'll get this, but I won't get that. Maybe I will get something, but I'll sacrifice something else in order to get something, right? It was all about compromise. But in this day and age of social media, instant gratification, consumerism, internet shopping, people don't want compromises. People want it all. People want this and that. Why choose? And for this era where everybody wants everything all at once, that is why the four-door coupe, this oxymoron of an idea, is somehow the perfect car. It gives people everything they want. They have the style, they have the space, they have everything. And that's why four-door coupes just work. The essence of this idea is you get everything you want, you get all the function, you get all the rational stuff, you get the brains, but it is supplemented with that irrational part. Something that cannot be quantified in numbers and sentences, something that we just know when we see it. That feeling of being special, that feeling of knowing true beauty. And that's why four-door coupes, or in particular this car, the BMW 6 Series Gran Coupe, just works. So there you go. You can have your cake and eat it too. You can indeed have both beauty and brains in the same package. But there is more to the story. In the 1960s, the American band The Byrds sang, "To everything, there is a season. Turn, turn, turn." And as it turns out, there is a season to classical car design as well. You see, this BMW 6 Series Gran Coupe, it is probably the ultimate expression of classical car design. Large engine in front, body in the middle, boot at the back. But classical car design is less and less relevant these days. When it comes to electric cars, they don't have an engine. So there is no longer a need to have an engine in front. The engine is below the body. And unfortunately, electric cars are yet to capture the elegant beauty, the sheer simplicity, the sheer wonder of the classical three-box design, of which this car is indeed one of the best examples. It is my wish that they get there someday. But in the meantime, I'm going to keep looking at this car, or maybe I should drive it. Should I look at it? Should I drive it? No, look at it for sure. Drive it. That's the right choice. Look at it. Drive.